Does this look familiar? Sitting in gridlock traffic, rushing from work to appointments, going to be late for dinner again. The road rage kicks in. This is the life we're used to. But what if life could look like this? An oasis of green parks, endless sidewalks, and empty roads. Impossible? Well, it's actually the concept behind the 15-minute city.
15-minute city, or the 15-minute neighborhood, is certainly something that's become very much, you can say, in vogue recently.
Paris is working towards it, so is Barcelona and Portland, and now Vancouver also has a plan in place.
Big new move number one was that we build a city where, for all residents in the city, 90% of your daily needs are within a walking distance.
When I put the closest grocery store in my GPS, it's more than a 30-minute walk away. But in a 15-minute city, I could walk to the grocery store, post office, doctor's appointment, gym, hair salon, dentist, you name it, all within, you guessed it, just 15 minutes. A solution not just for gridlock on the streets, but also for carbon emissions. In fact, the goals of creating a more walkable city were announced as part of Vancouver's recent Climate Emergency Action Plan. And the Vancouver Plan and Project team are already in the process of figuring out what neighborhoods should look like and how to translate that into land use strategies.
Just look at your neighborhood and look at your walk score. The walk score actually just tells you how many good things you're a short walk from. Where we get really low walk scores are in the parts of the city that are largely suburban. And so there's some sections where, single-family homes are really far from a lot of retail. And in those areas, the actual answer is to deliver more of those commercial services to them.
The Plan and Project team will be addressing council with options as early as July, and they'll also have some pilot project ideas. But for this plan to really work, you don't just need to change the city.
To meet the environmental goals that the country, the province, and the city have committed to repeatedly, is to change behavior.
So in Vancouver's latest Climate Emergency Action Plan, they announced new incentives to drive less, like connecting cycling and walking networks citywide in hopes that 80% of trips by 2030 will be made either by foot, bike, or transit. They also announced disincentives for driving, like implementing transportation pricing in the Metro Core and creating a carbon pollution surcharge on residential parking permits. But all of this takes some time.
Cities change slowly over time because you actually have to build them.
The team says they're looking at how to move Vancouver towards this vision over the next 30 to 50 years.
What happens when a group of the world's greatest minds gifted with wealth beyond our imagination buys a sprawling waterfront property in Toronto? They make plans for a $14.3 billion futuristic city, that's what. Sidewalk Labs released its Master Innovation and Development plans to turn a chunk of Toronto's Lake Ontario shoreline into the most futuristic city in the world. It would result in over 93,000 jobs and a better standard of living for its residents. Alphabet, an umbrella company that includes Google and Sidewalk Labs, is now creating the world's first smart city in Toronto, Canada. It seeks to provide technological solutions to improve citizens' lives. There will be two key areas. Quayside, which is along the shorelines of Lake Ontario and features houses, shops, and offices. The first office here, of course, will be Google's. The second area is the River District, an area of 152 acres featuring 5 neighborhoods surrounding the Don River. Now, on the housing front, there's a plan for a collection of new mixed-use buildings up to 30 stories tall. The project would cost around $3.9 billion and would use mass timber and modular components made in the local factory owned by Sidewalk Labs. To get around, the city will have a $1.2 billion light rail extension which would connect the neighborhoods to mass transit before the new residents move in. It would cut down on the need for residents to own a car, and it would be safe and affordable. Canada is known for its somewhat overwhelming winters. You've heard the jokes. Well, the hyper-local weather sensors would detect an oncoming snowstorm and heat up the snow-melting pavements. It would keep the streets clear for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as autonomous delivery robots. It's all going to be connected, heavily monitored, and pretty much self-regulating. Wi-Fi would be available for everyone throughout the city for free, and sensors around the area would collect data on the energy usage, traffic patterns, and much, much more to ensure you as a resident lead the most comfortable life possible. What's more, the city is going to be climate positive, aka netting a sub-zero carbon footprint. But we already expected that, right? In Toronto, Sidewalk Labs shows a picture of a world with intelligent pay-as-you-throw garbage chutes that separate your plastic from papers for you. The city would charge households by waste, and apps would tell residents when chairs on the waterfront were open so residents can get approvals for block party permits. In addition, traffic signals will auto-calibrate to ease pedestrian congestion during public events and rush hours. The director of Sidewalk Labs, Eric Jaffe, was primarily responsible for this impressive proposal. He expects, or rather hopes, that more cities around the world will pick up on this blueprint and use it for themselves. One of those ideas is for a factory-built housing. It helps developers complete their projects reliably, on time, and at a lower cost. Critique and government approval. Before all that, though, government officials have to scrutinize and approve Sidewalk Labs' master plan. Or not. And don't expect the process to be a snap. Some of the major elements of the project have shifted over time, and so have the targets of the project's detractors. When Waterfront Toronto, the government-appointed nonprofit developer of Toronto's Eastern Shore, chose Sidewalk Labs to plan their smart city development, the most controversial point of the plan was the idea that a Google sister company planned to harvest data in public space. Over time, Sidewalk Labs was criticized for not revealing how they would use the data and who would control it, and for a while there, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association sued the government to stop the project. So sure, Sidewalk Labs dreamt of making a section of Toronto a futuristic city, the likes of which we've only ever seen in science fiction. But skeptics saw a darker side. Thousands of cameras monitoring streets, and data from every household being taken and used. This was one among many things their CEO, Sundar Pichai, had to testify about when he was called to Congress and pretty much grilled for 3.5 hours. For those reasons, and perhaps others, the Sidewalk Toronto project was abandoned in May of 2020 to give way for a new kind of city. As exciting as the new city would have been, we still lost the chance to have an internet-first community, which promised affordable internet and precise data on our carbon footprint and consumption to live more sustainable lifestyles. We lost a fully integrated transport system, social housing, 93,000 jobs, and finally, a green city initiative. But bigger things are to come. The new city in Toronto. Now, Quayside will have a new, different kind of development. The government called for proposals when Google and Toronto parted ways, and these new plans seem to center on affordability, low-carbon design, and an emphasis on local and minority-owned businesses instead of what some have called a dystopian nightmare. There's a lot to be done. So far, the plans only include glossy renderings of wooden skyscrapers and the integration of elements of Lake Ontario into parks and recreational areas. But one thing's for sure, it won't be a Google smart city. Would you want to live in a Google city?